the natural selection.
Hello and welcome to the Natural Selection podcast brought to you by the University of Exeter's Centre for Ecology and Conservation. I'm Amber.
I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Claire.
And in today's episode we will be speaking to Professor Tom Tregenza, who is investigating insect evolution. And we will take a look at how you could help understand the secret lives of wild insects and contribute to scientific research.
Hi Tom, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Today we're going to be discussing the world of crickets. So let's start by discussing the research that led to your game. Can you explain your current cricket project for our listeners and explain what led you to start it?
So our cricket project is called Wild Crickets, and actually you can see more about that at wildcrickets.org. And that project came out of some work that we started about 15 years ago, where me and my postdoc Rolando Rodriguez Munoz, who's based in northern Spain, which is where our Wild Crickets field site is, we were working in Leeds under the sort of grey skies and mainly locked in laboratories using crickets to do lots of sort of neat little lab experiments looking at sexual selection and things like, did females benefit from mating with lots of males, and why did they benefit and why did they do it in the first place, and all sorts of stuff like that. But then Rolando's wife got a job back in Spain, so he moved back to Spain and we started building a constant temperature room in his house in Spain so that we could start continuing our lab work and collaboration across the Bay of Biscay. But then I moved to Cornwall, and we also started thinking these lab studies that we've been doing for kind of quite a number of years are all well and good, but I wonder how relevant they really are to animals in the wild. And really, this is a kind of problem or an issue with evolutionary biology in general, that we have lots of quite nice field studies, but they're nearly all done on large vertebrates like deer and birds and sheep and things like that you can follow in the wild. And then we've got lots of really nice lab studies that are done on things that you can keep in labs, because getting deer into labs is really quite problematic. So the lab studies are all done on things like insects, flies, crickets, the kind of thing that we were doing. And we thought it'd be really neat if we could actually try to cross that divide and study animals that can be used in the lab but actually in their natural environment. And Rolando knew that the meadow where he had played as a young boy was full of crickets, which were very closely related to the kind of crickets that we worked on at the time. And so we started thinking, let's have a look at what's going on with those crickets, and that's how this whole kind of Wild Crickets project started off.
So why crickets, and what can crickets teach us?
So I think we studied crickets because we were already studying them in the lab, and we were kind of we were looking for a system where we could use the same species in the lab and in the field. And the reason that we use the particular cricket that we do, Gryllus campestris, which probably many of your listeners will have come across if you're camping in France or Spain, or anywhere kind of Central Europe, you can hear these crickets that kind of go kind of all night, and they live in burrows, and as you approach them they suddenly disappear down the burrow. And because they live in the burrows, that provides this unique opportunity, because they actually use the burrows purely as a refuge from predators. So if a bird or a shrew or something tries to eat them, they run down the burrow. The burrow is very narrow, it's only wide enough for the cricket to go down. And that means they spend nearly all their time just hanging around the entrance to the burrow. And that allows us to set video cameras up all around our meadow and stick little tags on the back of every cricket and but literally watch their whole adult lives. So the reason we use crickets is because they were already a model system to study in the lab, and the reason for that was mainly because they've got this wonderful song, which is a kind of signal to females to mate with males. It's purely sexually selected, and we then wanted to look at them in the lab. And so I think what they can teach us are lots of stuff about the relationship between natural selection and sexual selection, because they've got this strongly sexually selected trait that can keep you awake all night, like a lot of sexually selected traits. And they also have this potential for us to follow them in the field, which most insects are tricky. They fly, hundreds of meters or disappear into the ground and never get seen again. So they're kind of neat in some practical senses.
Yeah, it's really great. And I think what's really exciting about your project is that you and your team decided to get the public involved. And you did this by creating your online game, Cricket Tales, as you mentioned. And that was developed with the help of the Cornish non-profit organisation Foam Kerno. And the way it works, for anyone that hasn't tried it yet, is that you can go to the Cricket Tales website and you're shown clips of video taken in the field of the crickets. And what you do is you press the appropriate button when the crickets do different things. So how did you come up with the idea of transforming your research into a game? And what kind of challenges did you encounter from doing this?
Okay, well, really those two things came in the opposite order. We encountered the challenge and then we decided to do the game. And the challenge was that it's all well and good thinking let's point some video cameras at crickets and watch their whole lives. But in our meadow there are sort of 100 to 300 crickets, sometimes even more. And so we have 140 cameras or more that are filming 24 hours a day, and then when it gets dark we have infrared lights that come on. And so as you can imagine, if you've got 140 cameras and you're filming the crickets for several months, then you very rapidly have hundreds of thousands of hours of crickets. In 1 year we record 30 years worth of video. So we were trying to watch this video, and at one point we'd spent several years watching it, and we realised that your older listeners may remember VHS videotapes, kind of the size of a paperback book, which probably your older listeners also remember. And we realised that if you put all the video that we'd already watched onto a shelf on VHS tapes, 3-hour-long VHS tapes, the shelf would measure all the way from Penryn down to Falmouth. It was several kilometres long of video that we'd already watched, and it was getting a little bit boring watching all that video. And so we thought, well, maybe if we had more people watching this video it would be a little bit more manageable. And of course there's a lot of people out there, and we thought if you're just watching a bit it might actually be kind of fun, and if we could get thousands of people involved or even hundreds of people, then maybe we could get through this video without Rolando in particular spending his whole life locked in a room watching these videos. So that was the motivation for doing it, and it's been relatively straightforward from our perspective because Foam Kern have done all the difficult work of building a platform that takes our video, which we've all got on hard disk drives, so we don't actually have it on VHS tapes, it's all stored on a massive array of servers, and chopping it up into little bite-sized chunks and then allowing people to look at one chunk at a time. So if you go to that Cricket Tales website, you can watch videos which are only a minute or two long, and we've already taken out all the periods where there's no cricket actually at a particular burrow. There's still quite a lot of videos where very, very little happens, which is kind of the nature of life. If you watched my life, then you'd find it was pretty boring on a minute-by-minute basis. But there are occasional bits of action, and I think the really cool thing is that anyone watching this video is genuinely collecting the data that we need. What we're really interested in is things like when does the cricket mate with another cricket? When does it get into a fight? When does it move from one burrow to another? Because these crickets are moving around the meadow, fighting with each other, taking over burrows, getting mating, singing, escaping from predators, being eaten by robins and all sorts of stuff. And so everything, the whole of cricket life is there, and it's just a question of helping us by watching a bit of it, while you're sitting around when you could be doing something less scientifically valuable.
Yeah, definitely.
So what specifically are you looking for in the videos, and what do you do with the game data, or how do you analyse it?
So the overall aims of our project are very broad. We started off trying to ask how important is sexual selection relative to natural selection in the wild, and then we started getting interested in whether we could actually look at how much the strength of selection varies among years, because there's massive variation in nature. We don't really know why there's so much variation, particularly within species, but one possibility is that the kinds of things that are selected for in one year are not the same as they are in the next year. So it might be very important to do a lot of singing in one year, but the next year might be very, very hot and singing might not be so important. And so we thought maybe we can study this and look for that. And then more recently, we've been getting very interested in using the crickets to study aging. So do the crickets run around full pelt all their lives and then fall over and die? Or do they slowly decline in their performance like I do? And that's one of the things that people can get from this video. As you watch the video, you have to track when the cricket enters and leaves its burrow, which is kind of a measure of how active it is, and we'll be able to see, do they do that less as they get older, and do they have less matings as they get older? Are they better at fighting as they get older? Do they get less good at fighting? Do they start off rubbish and improve? And all sorts of, so really all the data that we're looking to collect, we can collect from this citizen science project.
Have you done any citizen science projects before this? And do you think more studies should be using the public to help with scientific research?
I haven't really done any significant citizen science before. I've tried to provide a website for the Wild Crickets project, which is specifically aimed at the public, so that when we get press coverage of stuff, we can try to make it a bit more informative. But I never really tried to do a proper citizen science project. Now, I think it's a really terrific idea because, there's a lot of science which is quite boring. It needs a lot of, fairly straightforward work to be done. And as we move into a more and more digital age, more and more of that work can actually be done via a computer rather than with a pipette or something like that. And also, we have people who are living longer and have considerable amounts of leisure time. A greater proportion of their lives is available as leisure time, and hopefully kind of looking for something useful to do. And I think that scientists really need to make more effort to try to create less of a barrier between our ivory tower and people who could be joining in with the work. And I'd really like to make it a much more collaborative project, and that's kind of what the overarching aim of Cricket Tales is.
What has been your experience with the citizen science project, and what kind of feedback have you got from it?
I think it was a lot of fun making the Cricket Tales website and trying to think about how we could make it such that it has a balance between what we need to get out of it and it being something that the public can engage with without having to put a lot of investment into learning how to use it. I don't know if we've got the balance right. The problem is it isn't completely straightforward. We want people who will watch a significant number of the videos and will do it in a careful way, but at the same time it's something that everyone can do. And so the challenges are really about striking that balance, and that is a challenge that we've yet to, I think, properly overcome. What we really like is, to have thousands of players who all watch tens or hundreds of videos, and we don't have that yet. And so really, I think that by far the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome is recruiting players, because I think if I could talk to every individual potential player, I could persuade a lot of them to have a go at it and do 20 videos or something. But if you just see a link on a website, there's so much stuff out there. It's very difficult for people to be recruited to help with it, and I think that's a big challenge. And in terms of feedback, we've got about 150 people who've actually signed up to kind of become proper contributors. We did have an option where you could just have a go at the game as a guest, but we found that the number of people that did that was a very large number of people, but they'd watch a couple of videos and then they'd typically stop, which is potentially useful from a kind of educational perspective, but what we really wanted to focus on is genuinely engaging them in the science and not just have it as a look at what we're doing type of website. So now we've changed it so that you have to log in and create an account, or that all you have to do is provide an email address, which we don't even store, that provides you with a login name, and then you can get stuck in. And we've got over 150 people who are doing that, and between them they've already logged 20,000 events, so they are collecting useful data already, so that's very encouraging. And it's not like we have to collect it all by next week, because we're still trying to watch the video ourselves, and so I think the main question is how to get as many players on board as possible, and that's an exciting challenge.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today, and thank you for bringing us into the world of crickets.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and do go on and have a look at Cricket Tales, folks.
If you want to learn more about the Wild Crickets project, you can go to www.wildcrickets.org. And if you want to have a go at the Cricket Tales game to have some fun and participate in some scientific research, you can find it at crickettales.exeter.ac.uk. Finally, if you do have any questions, please get in touch. You can find us at naturalselectionpodcast.weebly.com or on Twitter at UOE Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to The Natural Selection.